So Marvel's Gang War is like the coolest event that they have going on right now that no one knows about. So check this out. Gang War is exactly what you think it is. It's literally just a giant war among the various gangs in Marvel Comics. So a little bit of explanation here, right? As most of you guys can probably imagine, the different warlords that exist out there, or gang lords, whatever you want to call them, right? The Owl, Black Mariah, Tombstone, people like that, Mr. Negative, they all have these kind of like little territories here and there that they basically rule. And for the most part, the alliances between these guys were tenuous at best, and only for a couple of reasons. The first is because of the kingpin Wilson Fisk, that when this guy was like running the criminal underworld, nothing ever happened without his purview, right? That with all these territories that were ran by all these gang lords, they all answered to Wilson Fisk. He ran the whole show. Now, during the story Devil's Reign, which we covered and we'll have a link to at the end of this video, Wilson Fisk became the mayor of New York. Technically, it happened after the events of Secret Empire, but during that time, he made it illegal to be a superhero in the city of New York. The public favored it. It was one of these things where he was just kind of like, think of all your friends and family that have died in collateral damage, right? Like that kind of thing. And so the public voted against superheroes operating publicly. The other part of this is that following the events of Devil's Reign, Wilson Fisk being outed as the mayor of New York and Luke Cage taking his place, where Wilson Fisk ended up going off and kind of going underground, and currently he's part of the Fall of X event. It left his role vacant, which had been taken over by Tombstone. And where Tombstone had kind of kept these things going for the most part, Tombstone was in effect quote unquote killed. Not killed, but kind of killed, right? That what had gone on in like Amazing Spider-Man number 38 is that Peter Parker, literally possessed by evil souls, if we're being honest with ourselves, he had actually pulled the plug on Tombstone after he'd been shot. He was effectively saved by the hospital, but it left Tombstone's role vacant. And that's where Gang War picks up. That what you have here is a guy named Hammerhead, who's kind of like running everything the way that Tombstone did, and everybody's kind of vying over the question, like, who takes over Tombstone's territory? Now, the cool thing about this, and this is the reason why it's so cool, is because it's basically a gigantic street level event, right? It's awesome. Every street level superhero that you know about is a part of this, which actually includes Shang-Chi. The Shang-Chi is actually operating within the confines of what's called the Five Weapon Society. He's kind of a warlord, kind of not, but he does have dealings with criminal elements. If you guys are interested in that story, we can cover it because it's kind of dope that like Shang-Chi basically becomes a criminal warlord. It's pretty awesome. But they're all kind of arguing over what it is that they're gonna do. Now, you could make an argument, why doesn't somebody just take over Tombstone's territory, right? Why doesn't someone like the Owl or Mr. Negative even? Why doesn't Mr. Negative just go and take over Tombstone's territory? Because it would leave him in a state of vulnerability. Say, for example, that he does that, right? Say, for example, that Mr. Negative just goes and invades Tombstone's territory. Well, you don't just readily do that because there are criminals there who are still loyal to Tombstone. It would be a war. He would go to war against Tombstone's forces. But while he's doing that, it leaves his territory open. So someone like Shang-Chi or Black Mariah could just say, well, now we're going to invade like Mr. Negative's territory and just take it over. And so again, like it's one of these things where it's all kind of tenuous. It's very, very conflicting. Now, what's also cool about this is that Hammerhead is here with the woman in his life, right? The girl that he's just kind of banging right at the moment. And one of the things that had happened up to this point is Madame Mask had basically been killed, or at least it was believed she was killed, right? Offed, whatever you want to call it. Now, we don't know the details about it, whether she's alive or dead, and Madame Mask has not historically been an overly important character, but she's always been a cool one. And so it's kind of this discussion of how there's a lot of interest and a lot of intrigue going on with like Madame Mask, who was recently offed, and now Hammerhead has taken over this role, and so on and so forth. So it looks like he's just kind of playing the criminal game and manipulating things in his favor, which he is. The cool thing about all this is Janice shows up. Now, why does Janice matter? Janice is the daughter of Tombstone, right? Like Janice Lincoln, right? The daughter of Lonnie Lincoln. And the cool thing is that Janice had been dating a guy named Randy Robertson, the son of Robbie Robertson, that between Amazing Spider-Man 59 and 66 under Nick Spencer's run, that what he had done is crafted this almost kind of like Romeo and Juliet type story, that when Robbie Robertson, right? The guy who works at the Daily Bugle under J. Jonah Jameson, Jameson when he learned his son was dating like the daughter of Tombstone. And when Tombstone learned his daughter was dating the son of Robbie Robertson, each of them tried to get their kids to stop dating, but ultimately they continued to do so in secret. And so with Tombstone out of the picture, once Janice steps up, the whole stance here is you can't just be here, right? Even Black Mariah says you can't just take a seat, right? Just because your pops died doesn't mean that your seat is now inherited by you. Every single one of us has earned a seat at this table in one form or another, usually by force is really what it is, right? Demonstrating their power, their capability, that kind of thing. But the cool thing about that is Hammerhead's like, okay, fine. If you want to earn a place at this table, then you need to do what we would do in this situation. You're gonna have to kill somebody close to you. In this instance, you're gonna have to kill Randy Robertson. Now the question's why? Because in the aftermath of Kingpin making it illegal for superheroes to exist in New York, it wasn't a law that could simply just be overturned by Luke Cage as the new mayor. A vote had to be forced, meaning the people had to basically protest and advocate for this happening. That's what Randy Robertson was doing behind the scenes. He was literally galvanizing the public and trying to turn public sentiment back in favor of superheroes so superheroes could operate publicly in the city of New York. And so literally, he's working against the entire criminal empire. So the idea of Hammerhead by having Janice do this is that one, it makes it almost impossible for her to do because while they are ex-fiancés, right? Like there is still love between the two of them. It's a whole reason why they didn't get married, right? It's a whole great big huge thing. But the other part of this is taking out Randy Robertson eliminates that, right? It sends a message to the public. If you try to make superheroes like legal again, we'll take you out. Right? And as you guys know, the general public, the average person doesn't quite have the same level of like resolve or courage or conviction that superheroes do. It's what makes superheroes stand apart from the general public. So the public would be far more likely to sort of see this message and then fall in line out of fear, as opposed to superheroes who would not be dissuaded. Now, the other part of this is actually this really cool argument that takes place between Spider-Man and Miles Morales, because what you do here is you transition to a character named Slide, whose suit is literally made of a material that allows him to just move super quick, right? It's not an overly important thing, but he is kind of a cool character, to be honest with you guys. In the midst of this, Miles Morales shows up, and both he and Peter Parker are able to overcome Slide pretty readily, right? And that's it. And then following that, Miles just reads Peter Parker the riot act. And the reason why is because Miles isn't fully aware of everything that was going on with Peter being possessed by like the sins of Norman Osborn, all that kind of stuff. But even before then, right? Like there's a legitimate beef that Miles has here where he's like, you never reached out. You never came to me and said, hey man, how's it going? You never checked on me or anything along those lines. And it's one of those funny things about Peter Parker. By and large, these stories were largely confined to like the conflicts that he had in his personal life, his relationship with Mary Jane Watson, making it to work on time, all that kind of stuff. And the Parker luck was always one of those things where it was very tongue-in-cheek, a little bit of comedy involved, where it's just like, man, Peter Parker can't get it together. But Miles showing up here is like, look, we're supposed to be friends and loosely teammates, in the sense that we're just like two Spider-Men in the same city, right? But it's like, you never checked in. At any point you could have. And you know, Peter's response is, well, man, I had stuff going on. And it's like, everybody has stuff going on, Peter. Everybody has things happening. Captain America has things happening. Thor has things happening, right? Like everyone has stuff going on. It's not an excuse to ignore your friends. And there's a really interesting argument to make here, because for those of you guys who are older like I am, right? Like I'm 39. Those of you guys who are older, you learn that people sort of fall into these routines in their lives. And oftentimes maintaining those friendships sort of gets taken for granted, right? Like, well, they're friends I've known for a long time, they'll always be there. And that kind of constant communication, like it was when you were in your 20s, going to the bars all the time, different things like that, it begins to go away, right? Marriage, children, the job, things like that all kind of begin to take precedent. And so it's one of those things that where Peter's not really struggling with like the normal things that you and I would struggle with like a 9-to-5. It doesn't change the fact that the people in his life feel the effects that Peter just, while he cares, doesn't really give the impression that he does. And so it's one of those interesting things, because in the end, he says, like, I can't believe that I'm the one that has to like remind you of this, but it seems like you forgot. With great power, there must also come great responsibility. Feel like you could do well to remember that. And it's an important thing, because the idea of great responsibility is not confined to like, if you can stop a villain, then you should stop a villain. It's if you can remind your friends that you care and be there for them when they need you, then you should, right? So it's a really, really interesting thing, because it's just kind of Miles holding a lot of anger and a lot of resentment towards Peter by feeling abandoned by him. Now, the reason why this is also so cool is because during Brian Michael Bendis' Spider-Man 2, when Peter and Miles met for the first time, Peter was the one who gave Miles the blessing in the Ultimate Universe to be that universe's Spider-Man after the Ultimate Universe version of Peter Parker had died. So there's a very close connection between the two. Brothers, mentors, whatever you want to call it, right? It's a very close connection there. So it's one of the reasons why it hits Miles so hard. But at that point, you basically switch over to like Hammerhead having this conversation with the chick that he's with, right? And the cool thing here is that the question that's asked by this girl is like, do you really think that like Janice is gonna kill Randy? Do you really think she can do that? And his response is, no, she's not going to, because at the end of the day, while she's a villain and she operates by the mantle of the Beetle, she's not a killer, right? Like, she's a villain and she'll rob banks or something along those lines, but she won't kill a guy, right? She just can't bring herself to do it. And even if she could, she certainly won't be able to take out Randy because she loves him too much. It's just not going to happen. And that's when he says, like, I have a contingency plan. It was never the goal for Janice to kill Randy. The goal was for Janice to lead the henchmen of Hammerhead to Randy. And so when that happens, like, they go to fire the killing shot on Janice, which is really kind of like his way of being able to take out the daughter of Tombstone, leaving her territory open for him to take over and then take out Randy, which eliminates any concern about superheroes potentially becoming legal again, because the figurehead for this entire movement basically dies. Randy jumps in the way and he's injured here. Now, Spider-Man shows up to Luke Cage, who just got the news, and as the two of them are talking, it's one of those things where Spider-Man's like, look, I've had a lot going on. I heard about what was going on with Randy. I really want to help, but he doesn't know that Randy got shot. What he's saying is, I wanted to help out with Randy in terms of like the protests and galvanizing public sentiment towards superheroes being legal. What can I do? But that's when he's told by Luke Cage, you don't know. Yeah, man, Randy's been shot. And so what you do is you jump to the hospital, where a nurse comes running in and talking to Robbie Robertson about him being shot, realizing, oh no, it's okay, I'm sorry, it's somebody else with the last name Robertson, somebody named Randy. Only for Robbie to find out his son's been shot. So he goes running, like goes bolting to the ER, where they're literally bringing Randy in. Janice is by his side, and the stance of Robbie is, get out of here. Ever since he met you, his life has gone to trash. You have done nothing but make his life worse. Do the best thing. Like, if you really want to help, if you really want to make this guy's life better, leave, disappear, and never contact him again. He runs her out of there, right? Which, in truth, is actually an accurate statement. Despite the love between Janice and Randy, she's only ever made his life worse. And so to a degree, Robbie's argument makes sense here. But the other thing that he's not really considering is, like, Randy's his own man. He knew what he was getting into. So sure, to like be associated with Janice is to live a life of danger, but as far as he was concerned, it was a risk worth taking. And so what you do is you pick up with Hammerhead as well as the woman that he's with, as the two of them are kind of talking, right? Of course, getting ready to touch naughty bits. And the funny thing about this is she kind of makes this offhanded remark, like, you really kept the mask of Madame Mask? And he's like, I mean, what do you want, right? There's not a whole lot of trophies in our line of work, and I'm more or less the one that orchestrated her being taken out. So yeah, of course I'm going to keep the mask of Madame Mask. It's a huge trophy to have, right? Like, one of the most significant members of the criminal underworld. Yeah, man, it's like having Wilson. It's like having the Kingpin's cane, right? It's like a big thing. And so what ends up happening is she kind of asked the question, are you sure that taking out Randy's the right decision to make here? Because by taking him out, it's entirely possible that you end up turning public sentiment away from legalizing superheroes, that fear gets the better of them, or you turn him into a martyr, right? And people begin to see his cause as something that's greater than themselves, and they begin to fight for it. They double down, and they're more zealous than they are before. And so what he ends up doing is just like grabbing her, seizing her, scaring the crap out of her, and just being like, are you scared or are you awake? Which one is it, right? And she's like, I don't really know. And he's like, that's the whole point. It doesn't matter. What matters is you're on the ground and I'm not. And that's because I am exactly as mean as I need to be, which is why I'm in charge of that room of psychos back there, a room full of killers who want nothing more than to kill each other. And he says, the thing is, I'm the reason they want to ace each other in the first place. Then I give myself the job of keeping everything from blowing up like grade A TNT. That's what you call job security. The whole idea of Hammerhead up to this point has been orchestrating and seeding chaos throughout the entirety of the criminal underground community, and then positioning himself as the guy that keeps that chaos in order. It's actually incredibly smart. And what's so crazy about that is that it's not dissimilar from what Kingpin used to do back in the day. But in the midst of all this, literally this girl just like grabs a pipe and just starts beating him over the head. Now, normally that wouldn't be easily done with someone like Hammerhead, hence the reason why he has the name. It's almost nigh indestructible, but literally this thing is just made of like adamantium and magic, right? And so like as she's kind of taunting him, she bashes his head in and kills this guy, right? And that's right when like Janice shows up, and Janice is just kind of like, what's going on here? And her response is like, I did what you were going to do, but I beat you to it. And that's when Janice puts 2 and 2 together and realizes this is not some arbitrary person out there. This is Whitney Frost. It's Madame Mask, that she's just been underground and masquerading this entire time, waiting for the moment when she could strike. And what Hammerhead had been doing, completely oblivious to the fact that he was talking to her, was spilling the beans on everything that he'd been doing. So now she knows exactly how to play the field, how to take everybody out. And where Janice is just kind of like, no, I don't care about any of that stuff, right? He had Randy Robertson shot. I just want to take this guy out. The response of Madame Mask is, you have no idea what's going on here, do you? Like, you have no real clue what's about to happen. She's like, word is gonna get out that Hammerhead is gone, that he's dead. No one's territory is safe now, right? The treaties he held together will fall. Moves will be made seemingly out of fear. But don't be fooled, it is greed, opportunity for expansion, and opportunity brings opportunists. You're too young to remember the last land grab. It's thrilling, really. And she says, watching the sharks come out, anyone who has a claim, past or present, they're going to make a move. And so that's when Janice realizes this is open war. That's literally what it is. And so you jump to Spider-Man meeting with Robbie Robertson, and the two of them having a kind of heartfelt conversation where Spider-Man's really kind of talking to Robbie, and Robbie's like, you really shouldn't be here, right? You should be out there. That's what he was fighting for, that kind of thing. And Spider-Man feels very guilty. He feels very sad. But the response of Robbie is, no, you don't get to feel that, right? You don't get to feel those emotions. And if you do feel them, you feel them later. Your job is to be a superhero. Your job is to stand up for what it is that Randy believed in and to get out there and fight the good fight. But as they're having this massive conversation, there's just like all these explosions that go off across the city of New York. And it's like a full-on war between all the different warlords that exist out there, right? Shang-Chi, Black Mariah, Mr. Negative, the whole 9 yards. It's just full-scale conflict on the ground level. I would argue this is more significant than like some threat, like some single guy showing up here, because how do you stop them all, right? Like it's all the warlords and all their henchmen all going to war against one another. I'll be honest, man, if they did this in like the Spider-Man PlayStation game, wouldn't it be dope? Like it's one of the coolest things ever. And so Spider-Man immediately takes off to meet with Luke Cage. And as the two of them are talking, Luke Cage is like, I mean, look, man, it's not really an Avengers level threat, but I don't know if we have the ability to take this on, right? Like Spider-Man says, like, I'm about to do a whole lot of superheroing and I don't want distractions. And the response of Luke is, I'm picking up what you're putting down, right? I will keep the police out of your way. And the response of Spider-Man is, not my way, our way, right? I need a team. So literally Spider-Man is bringing together every street level superhero, Spider-Man, like himself, Daredevil, Miles Morales, Luke Cage, the whole 9 yards, and they're all going to go to war against the villains. It's why I'm telling you guys, it's the best event that Marvel has going on that no one is talking about, and it's amazing. But with that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this to an end. Let me know if you want me to cover the rest of this, and we'll do that alongside the Fall of X, and I will catch you all later. Peace.